My name is Andrea Allen, and I'm currently the president of the Alumni Association. And I'm very happy to see you all here this evening. So we'd like to start with the land acknowledgement, and then we'll move into our program. So we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this location is still the home of many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I am not currently in Toronto at the University of Toronto. I'm actually in North York. So I'd like to acknowledge the land that the City of Toronto is on for those of us that are not necessarily down at the University of Toronto. So indeed, North York and other regions is a part of the traditional land of many, as we are all on Turtle Island. The Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and just to name a few, and many other diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We all have responsibilities to be active players in decolonization, and of which we are currently enacting by coming together, speaking up, and staying informed about the needs and desires of our Indigenous comrades. We must all acknowledge that there are people like myself who came to this land, some of us on the Atlantic human trade ship, and many of us who came as colonizers and forgot that they were settlers. We give thanks to the Indigenous ancestors and to their patience, but acknowledge that it has been exploited. Can we take a few moments, 10 seconds, and reflect on where we currently are situated individually and on whom and to whom the land actually belongs? Thank you. So this evening, we're very grateful to have our new interim dean, Charmaine Williams, who is no stranger to most of us. Most of us know Charmaine, as she's been with us for some time. Professor Charmaine Williams joined the Factor-Inwentash School of Social Work in 2002. Her research bridges practice of access and equity, issues that affect various populations, including racial minority women, LGBTQ individuals in local and international context, and individuals and families affected by serious and persistent mental illness. The majority of her practice experience has been in the mental health care system, where she worked in inpatient and outpatient services, providing interventions for individuals, families, and groups. She has also been involved in organizational change initiatives in the healthcare sector and has extensive experience developing and delivering professional education in the area of anti-racism, cultural competence, mental health, and addictions. Professor Williams is currently serving as interim dean for the Factor-Inwentash. Prior to taking on this role, she was the Vice Dean of Students at the School of Graduate Studies, University of Toronto. So Michelle English is our moderator for the session this evening, and she graduated from the Factor-Inwentash School in 2015. She's a registered social worker at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and she graduated from the faculty focusing on mental health and health field of studies. She also completed the collaborative program in addiction. Michelle has over 12 years of experience in the areas of mental health and addiction, community and social services, health administration, and emergency telecommunication. She has worked for various agencies in the community, including Ministry of Community and Social Services, San Romano Way Revitalization Association, Across Boundaries, Wood Green, Ronald McDonald House, and the Trillium Gift of Life Network. Currently, Michelle is part of the Forensic Early Intervention Services at the Vanier Center for Women and the Toronto South Detention Center. Michelle is also a member of the Alumni Association, and she is involved with our mentorship program, and she's also involved with the practicum placement program.
Thank you so much for that opportunity to be here. And Dean Charmaine Williams, I'm so glad to be part of this Q&A with you this evening. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see me, but I hope that everyone can hear me well. Could you share with us a little bit about your career as a social worker and how you find, as a FIFSW alum, your education? How has it impacted you?
Sure. You know, and before I do that, I just want to take a moment to say how glad I am to be here tonight. I was looking forward to connecting with the Alumni Association, and then I got to see the list of people that were coming, and I saw so many familiar faces, so many familiar names, people that I worked with in the past, people I work with now, people that have been wonderful friends to the faculty. You know, I'm seeing that we saw Judy was here already, and Joan Aaron, who are a big part of the online clinic that we are starting and that we'll hear about tonight. I saw as well that one of our former speakers at the Distinguished Speakers event is here, Setsuko Thurlow. And there is even someone here who employed me as a research assistant when I was a master's student, Professor Robin Wright, which is so nice. That's a nice rounding up of my whole life here, right? So when people say I've been here since 2002, the reality is I've actually been here a lot longer because I started here as an MSW student quite a bit before that, and just had such a wonderful experience here that in some ways I never left, actually. So talking about, you know, my career as a social worker, what brought me here really was a desire to do good work, you know, and I particularly wanted to go to this faculty because they were starting to talk about research and social work and the possibilities for what we could do with that. And I was coming from a heavy research background. My original degrees were, my undergraduate degrees were biology and psychology. But I wanted to do something that really called to my heart. And I feel like social work turned out to be the thing that used just the best parts of who I was. And I've often said to students, you know, if you can find this thing that uses the best parts of who you are, that is a wonderful gift. I mean, I could have done other things. I think I could have been successful at other things, but this was what I really wanted to do. And when I came here, I just connected with such wonderful instructors and wonderful people. And, you know, I appreciate the time we took with the land acknowledgement, because when we do the land acknowledgement, I always think, you know, how will that influence what I say next and what I do next? And today it makes me think about the people I'm so grateful to that were part of my social work journey. So Robin Wright, who gave me an RA position way back when. But I also think, you know, we had our first faculty meeting recently, and I sent a thank you note to two of the faculty members who were my professors when I was a social work student, just expressing my gratitude for seeing them there and telling them how much it meant to be in a meeting with them, and that they were touchstones for me. And you know, also tonight I think about Marion Bogo, who is one of those touchstones for me as well, and how much I miss her. And so so I'm grateful to have had wonderful people that were part of my social work journey that just set me on fire for social work so much that I couldn't wait to go out there and do it. And so, you know, the education that I took, that I got here, just, you know, I think at the time I was thinking I was going to be a person who worked in the mental health care system, and I had a wonderful career there, but I just couldn't have imagined how much it would allow me to do. Like just all the exciting things I was able to do as a social worker, because I've been prepared to think systemically, because I've been prepared to think about organizations and communities as well as individuals, families, and groups, because I had been given this way of working that was so value-based, right? To be in a field where you can talk unapologetically about the ethics and the values and the justice of the work that we're doing together. You know, that has colored everything for me. And even though I'm not working in direct practice anymore, every role that I've ever taken, I consider a social work job. So when I was the associate dean, I saw that as me doing organizational social work. And when I went to the School of Graduate Studies, I was like, what a great opportunity to do some good social work here. And I went and did that good social work. And now as a dean, it continues to influence how I think about the work I'm doing in this role as well. So, I mean, in some ways, it's impossible to say all the things that this did for my career, but it certainly launched me into a wonderful career. And, you know, there's a YouTube clip online where I say, you know, the MSW is 1 degree with a million possibilities. That has certainly been my experience.
Dean Williams, you've definitely taken advantage of those possibilities and those opportunities. We'd also like to ask you, what is your vision for the Factor-Inwentash Faculty of Social Work?
Well, I mean, I suppose like there's a way you ask that question of the person who's the dean, because they're going to like chart out this this pathway. And I'm in this interim dean position. So I have like a vision for what the next year looks like, but in some ways a broader vision of, you know, that just comes from being a member of this faculty. And in so many ways, I see us moving into spaces where we can really make a difference. And, you know, we have like, it's not even just, we're doing things locally, we're doing things nationally, we're doing things internationally that are really bringing, I believe, a social justice orientation into spaces where it's needed. And that can be in the small spaces of what happens between an individual, you know, practitioner and an individual client, but it's also in much bigger spaces. So my vision for this faculty is that we'll continue to do that we will continue to educate excellent social workers, because I really believe we educate excellent social workers. And I have been a person who has been a recipient of social workers service out there. I've met our grads, which I think for them, it's probably a horrible nightmare to have one of your professors show up as one of your clients. But like, they just were so excellent. I was just so proud of our students and what they were doing. No longer our students, but just so proud of the professionals they are. So excellent social workers. And I think also that, you know, we've really shown ourselves to be people who are responsive and adaptive to what is happening in our world. And I think that a solid education does that, but it's also the people that we get here, you know, the people who choose this field and choose to do this work with us. And so my vision is that social work will be better known. I think there is still a bit of mystery out there about what we do, that they will say, hey, you know what, we need a social worker here, or look at what those social workers did, that will be better known, that we will continue to be part of the creation of an excellent group of social workers out there, and that the social workers that graduate from our school will be increasingly diverse, with increasingly diverse experiences and backgrounds and knowledges and perspectives that make us a richer field. My vision includes transforming social work so that it is a field and a profession and a body of research that is attuned to the contemporary needs of the communities around us. And I mean, I feel like I'm sort of doing a world dominance of social work thing, but like at the same time, that we will also be excellent collaborators. That is not about a dominance of any kind, but about building the relationships and the connections and the opportunities and the spaces where good and just things can happen. So that is my vision for social work. And as the interim dean, as a member of this faculty, I want to be part of that.
Thank you for that answer. We understand that you were actively involved in the FIFSW Alumni Association when you first graduated. I wonder if you could share a bit about your experience with the association at that time.
Sure. Now, I'm going to admit this, like when I first thought about this, I thought, so reach back 30 years and try to remember what you were doing 30 years ago. And so when I first graduated, I was quite involved in Alumni Association events because it was how I was connecting with my colleagues. So if we can remember back to a time before LinkedIn, before all these things that like make it possible for us to connect in other ways, the events meant a lot to me. And I think, you know, I was lucky enough to be in a setting where there were other social workers. I know not everybody had that, but still it was a multidisciplinary setting. I was at what was then the Clark Institute of Psychiatry when I first graduated. So being able to connect with other supervisors, other social workers was really enriching and sort of grounding. It was really grounding in terms of remembering, you know, what I had learned, what was important, what was distinct and special about what social workers did. And then also just like connecting with other people around that. And this is something that I think is still valuable about an alumni association, our ability to connect with people who, as I've said before, are our collaborators in making our communities more just places. You know, this is important, and this is an incredibly valuable thing that an alumni association does. Before that, I mean, beyond that, when I was I still attended events, but then I became very active as an alumni that was just involved in different things around the faculty. So I was sitting on committees and things like that. And I remember MSW studies. I remember the Anti-Racism and Multiculturalism and Native Issues Center. I don't know how many people remember that. I was quite involved in that. Dean searches. I feel like I've done a lot of dean searches as an alumni. So just a lot of staying involved with the faculty, and then through that with other social workers, which was great.
Sounds like you had a very enriched experience with the Alumni Association.
I really did.
I'd like to ask, what are some of the ways you envision advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion within the faculty?
Yeah, well, I certainly want to give credit to my predecessor, Dean Dexter Voisin, and the work that he did while he was here, and the impact he had on our faculty as well as the entire university. He was just he had such a clear focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and I think really built on the work that had been done before him by Faye Mishna to really strengthen our work in these areas. I would like to see, one of the things that I've already been thinking about is how do we create the pathways for more underrepresented students to be entering into social work, entering into graduate studies in social work, and entering into academia and other types of leadership roles. Because of course our MSWs and our PhDs take on all kinds of leadership roles. So a strong interest for me, a big interest for me, is about pathways, creating the environment, the experiences, the space in which all kinds of people can flourish. And I think as well, collaborating with the university, which is now focusing a lot of energy on this, in having an influence in other spaces. And this is one of the things about both the dean's role, but also the fact that our social work students and our social work faculty members, and even our social work staff are involved in so many other things around the university. And I really think that we can provide leadership on this. We've been thinking about these issues for a very long time. And while on the one hand, I think, well, it's great everybody's, decided this is important now, but we're ready for this. And also I think that we also don't want to lose sight of the fact that we already had something called social justice, right? And so it's not that we have to completely jump into this basket called equity, diversity, inclusion. It's part of our commitment to social justice, and there is more in our commitment to social justice that can make equity, diversity, and inclusion deeper and stronger and better. So I would like to see that be part of the work that we're doing as a faculty. And then within the faculty itself, I think we're at a great moment. We've been having conversations about how equity, diversity, inclusion, and I'm going to add social justice, is reflected in every single thing we do, like in admissions, in our continuing ed, in our committee work, in our classes, like across everything. I want it to be obvious, visible, palpable, that this is part of what we do across everything that happens in this faculty. So I feel like that's good work for anybody who's leading this place.
Thanks, Dean Williams. So now I'm curious to know, and I think a lot of us are thinking about how we can advance social justice within our own role. And so I know that there are many of us here today who are FIFSW alum. What suggestions or advice would you give for us as social workers to take on the role in our own way of advancing social justice?
I think no matter what your role is as a social worker, I think we're always looking out for the small opportunities and the big opportunities to make social justice central in what we're doing. I have found that actually you can turn a lot of conversations just by asking the question, what would look like justice in this situation? And people are kind of like, what does she mean by that? I'm like, justice, what would be a just outcome here? You know, what feels like justice here? What would be the ethical outcome here? Like raising these kinds of questions, I think, start conversations that can make things better for people. I think that also social justice can be just about the stance you have when you're conducting yourself as a practitioner, a policymaker, whatever your role is. The way you talk about the work you do, the way you talk with people about what brings you together, because we know there are a myriad of issues around marginalization and privilege and all these things that make the difference between who becomes a receiver of social work services and who becomes somebody who gives who is acting on social work services, right? So even the conversations we have with people about what brings us together are this opportunity to say, this is an environment in which we are achieving social justice. This is an environment where I am invested in achieving social justice on your behalf. And then thinking about that in the spaces we work in and trying to get people, I don't believe it's so much that you have to convince them necessarily, but to get them to start thinking about it that way, to start thinking about how the work they do isn't just like, we're not producing, tires on a assembly line. We're working with people's lives. We're working with situations that are bigger than us in terms of the fact that what's happening to this person reflects a social context, an economic context, a political context, all these things, right? Getting people to think about that, which I know sometimes can make people feel overwhelmed. What am I going to do about the political context, the economic context? But it changes the way we talk and think and act. And I think it starts in the mind and it becomes what we're saying, what we're hearing, what we're thinking, what we're doing. So I would say start with that. How is it in my thinking, what I'm saying, what I'm hearing, and how I'm hearing it, what I'm doing? How did my client experience me as somebody who is invested in justice for them, who recognizes that they have likely been somebody who has experienced injustice? How is that? How do they know that I get that? How do I help the people that I work with see that we are in the justice business? That's what we're doing here, right? So, I mean, listen, I know that we're tired too, right? You don't wake up every day ready to get in there with that, but the opportunities are there. And I think they're important for us to feel, to connect with the values that brought us to this work in the first place.
That's a great answer. The thing that came to mind for myself was thinking about reflexive practice and incorporating reflection and thinking about being in my client's shoes. And so I completely agree with you. Now, in the faculty's welcome story, you shared that this is a quote, there's also a real opportunity to foster social work leadership on equity, diversity, and inclusion issues. And the dean's position gives me a platform to take those issues into places where they may need to be heard and where the perspective of a social worker could be really useful. I wonder, Dean Williams, if you could share what spaces you hope to share those messages and where you think they would be most effective.
Well, I think, I mean, it's like with any leadership position you take. I mean, part of the reason why you take leadership positions is because you want to, part of the reason why I take leadership positions is because I want to sit at a table where I know you can affect what's happening on a larger scale, right? So the thing about the dean is now I'm at these tables that I wasn't at before. I experienced it to some extent being the vice dean of students at the School of Graduate Studies. And again, that's one of the reasons I took the role, right? I'm like, I think I can make a difference in graduate studies because I'll be connecting with this person in that office. So as the dean, you sit at these other tables, right? And you also have a different kind of voice, right? It's heard differently. And I'm not sure, I might be a bit ambivalent about that, but it's true. So where do I want to take it? I mean, the most immediate space for me is my workplace, this place I'm working in, right? That is a place where I now have a platform and the ears of people to take this into the space. And I do truly believe that the education we have as social workers gives us some expertise in this area. And one of the reasons I was so excited when we established the social justice and diversity stream was I was ready for social work to take over the entire field of that, right? There were people out there sort of saying, yeah, I do this. No, we do this. We do this really well. So I do believe that we can lead this. As I said, we're in a field that's been thinking about this for a very long time. We've been immersed in this. This is how we think about all the things we do. So I see the dean of a faculty of social work as somebody who can take that into this university as a most immediate space, but also into the city, onto the national stage. They're all, even the international stage, right? You have all these places now that you're able to go. And you know, what do I bring? What is the value that I bring to this table? I mean, in some ways, it's a question that I was asking myself, even when I was sitting on a multidisciplinary team when I first graduated, right? What is specific about what I as a social worker do and bring to this team? What is the value added by my presence here, by the knowledge I have, by the skills I have, right? So I think that's a question you take onto all the stages, all the places where you can be. And if you're not on a stage you find your way into that stage. You just say, oh, you know what you need in there? A social worker. I'm available. I'll do that. So I think you find your way in, and I think there's a lot of places I can take it. And I think we're in a moment. I mean, I sort of say moment because sometimes you worry about when the moment might fade, but we're in a moment where people are listening, ready, investing. Let's seize it and then put it in there so it can't be taken out.
Thank you, Dean Williams. The last question that we'd like to ask is, what are some of the key learnings and messages of the faculty for students as they prepare for a future career in social work, more specifically around the profession's role in advancing social justice?
Well, I think if I reflect on my own education and also my role as an educator in this faculty, that, you know, one of the key learnings was that an orientation to social justice is not optional for us. It's not something that you just bring in when you think of it or when you, it's the foundation of what we do. And I think another thing that I learned and that I'd like to see us talking about more is that we need to be self-aware, as you already said, that there needs to be a reflexivity in our practice, but we also need to be healthy, and that we have to, like, especially, you know, right now when things are so hard, you know, things are so hard. Everything that we're doing has become harder. And I think a lot about my colleagues who are on the front lines, who are doing social work out in these communities where there's so much need and things are so hard right now. And we are people that have thrown our hearts into this profession, you know, like, because we talk so much about the science and the evidence, we don't talk as much about the heart that we bring into it. We wouldn't be here, I don't think, if we didn't have that. And so bringing the heart into it makes it so hard not to have your heart taken over by it, you know? And I think that that is an important learning, that it is that is good and it's wonderful to bring your heart into these things, but you also need to take care of your heart. And that's something that we do together, that you need your colleagues, you need your family, you need your friends, you need these things that help you keep your heart in the work. I think, I mean, I feel like I could do a long list, but that's probably like the, the things I'd focus on, the justice and the heart. Because I feel like sometimes, because we get really caught up in fitting into this space where they want like these reductionistic kind of outcomes and reductionistic ways of talking about what we do, that we don't also talk about the values of what we do and the heart of what we do.
I just want to thank Dean Williams for her perspectives tonight. And I'm definitely going to take your words to heart and really think about what I can do to advance social justice within my work. I think that it's important for us to reflect on our practice and how we can move the agenda forward. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I'd like to formally thank you as well for the opportunity to hear about good social work. Thank you. Social justice orientation internationally, that is what we do. There's a message in the chat that speaks to the fact that that is what we've always done. The person, Stephen Laurie, spoke to Beverly Antle, who spoke about, I'm sorry if I pronounced her name wrong, at her funeral, that she noted that social work is the only profession where social justice is part of the professional mandate. So we're all very happy to see that being centered, and indeed, justice and heart. We look forward to that. Thank you.